She saw an old man standing in the rain, cold, hungry, forgotten. So she gave him a hot meal. What she didn't know was that moment would cost her job, her pride, but also unlock something no one saw coming. Because when the door opened next, the entire café went silent. It was just after 11, and the rush had already begun. Inside the Oak Street Diner, a little place squeezed between a dry cleaner and a drugstore, the clinking of mugs and hum of orders filled the air. Locals knew this hour as storm time. The booths filled fast, coffee pots stayed hot, and nerves got tested by the minute. Ava Daniels, 29, moved between tables like she'd done it 1,000 times. Her sneakers were soaked from the morning downpour. The stain on her apron, iced tea from an earlier spill, was still damp, but she didn't complain. Ava never did. Table 6 was missing fries. A toddler screamed under booth 3. Her co-worker, Emily, looked like she might burst into tears at any second. Ava leaned in, whispered gently, "You got this. Don't let him see you break," and gave her a soft pat on the back before heading to the counter. Behind that counter stood Roy Mercer, the manager, mid-40s, slicked back hair, a voice that cut like glass. He ran the place like a drill sergeant and acted like every shift was a test of loyalty. He didn't yell. He didn't have to. His silence could cut you worse than words. "Daniels," he barked, arms folded. "Table 12 still doesn't have their check." Ava didn't turn around. "Sent it 10 minutes ago," she answered calmly. "Then walk it over yourself," Roy snapped. "This isn't room service." She bit her tongue. She'd learned by now, Roy never looked for a reason, just an opening. And this wasn't the time. But just as she turned toward the kitchen, she saw him, an old man, standing just inside the door, soaking wet. His coat hung off his bony shoulders. His boots were untied. One eye slightly cloudy, like it hadn't seen clearly in years. Nobody noticed him. Not the couple arguing over a check. Not the teenager on his phone. Roy was too busy barking about table orders. But Ava noticed. She stepped toward him slowly. "Sir?" she asked gently. "Are you okay?" He blinked, twice. Then his lips moved. I think I was supposed to meet someone here." His voice was dry, shaky, barely there. A dog tag hung loosely under his collar. The patch on his coat was faded, but still readable. A veteran. Old military issue. Maybe Korea. Maybe Vietnam. "You hungry?" she asked. He gave a tired smile. "Could eat something warm." Ava nodded, gently guiding him to an empty booth. She brought him a blanket from the lost and found and placed it around his shoulders. She knew the diner's policy. No freebies, no handouts. Roy had even posted a sign in the break room, "We're a business, not a shelter." But that didn't matter now. Ava reached into her apron, pulled out a $10 bill from her own tips, and walked straight to the kitchen. "Meatloaf, mashed, green beans, extra gravy," she told the cook. The line cook, Mateo, glanced at her. He'd worked with Ava long enough. He didn't ask questions, just nodded and got to work. She brought the food over herself. Warm water, a slice of cornbread, a soft smile. The man stared at the plate like it was gold. "Thank you," he whispered. "You didn't have to." Ava smiled. "Yeah, I did." But just as she turned to check on her other tables, she heard the footsteps. Roy. He'd seen the whole thing. And from the way his jaw clenched, she already knew what was coming. But what she didn't expect was how he would do it. He stepped out from behind the counter. "You mind telling me what the hell that was?" The clatter of dishes slowed. Customers started looking up. He was hungry, Ava said, steady but quiet. "He didn't ask for anything. I paid from my own tips." Doesn't matter, Roy hissed. This isn't a charity. You want to feed the whole damn street too? Ava stood her ground. He's a veteran. He needed help. Roy scanned the room, then raised his voice. Attention, folks. Just so we're clear, this waitress here has decided she's now our donation center. Free meals for everyone, on her dime. The room fell dead silent. A fork stopped midair. A baby stopped crying, and Ava just stood there, red in the face, but not with shame, with fury. Roy pointed to the door. You're done. Apron off. Get out. And just like that, without a warning, without a word from anyone else, Ava Daniels was fired for feeding a hungry old man. But that wasn't the end, because someone had seen everything, and that someone hadn't eaten yet. Ava stood still, the room pressing in on her. The plate was still warm on the old man's table, his fork halfway to his mouth. His eyes, confused, almost frightened, moved from Roy to her and back again. He tried to say something, but no one heard it. Roy waved him off like he was some stray muttering nonsense. Sir, please enjoy your meal, but stay out of staff matters. The old man didn't sit, didn't eat. He reached slowly into the inside pocket of his coat. His hand trembled as he pulled out a small silver object, barely catching the light. A badge, bent and worn at the edges. It was a Purple Heart. A hush swept through the diner. I served in Quezon, the old man said, voice shaking. Most of my boys didn't make it home, but they'd never let this stand. Roy squinted at him, unconvinced. Excuse me. She showed me more respect in 10 minutes, the veteran said, than I've seen in decades. Ava stepped in gently, voice low. You don't owe me anything, sir. Just finish your food, okay? But he didn't sit back down. He looked at her, really looked at her, and then placed the Purple Heart on the table next to the plate. With quiet dignity, he whispered, They'll know I'm not alone. And somehow, the way he said it didn't feel like a warning. It felt like a promise. Ava untied her apron slowly, folding it with care. Not like someone giving up, but like someone handing over the last piece of something they earned. She didn't cry. Not in front of him. Not in front of Roy. In the kitchen doorway, Mateo watched. His hands still had towel marks from scrubbing pans. This ain't right, he muttered. You want to go too, Roy snapped. Mateo didn't answer, just kept his eyes on Ava. She passed by the old man on her way out and placed a soft hand on his shoulder. It's okay, she whispered. Really, it's okay. But his eyes stayed locked on hers. They'll come, he said again. They always come. Outside, the rain had picked up. Ava's hoodie barely held it off as she stood by the bus stop, apron still clutched in her hands. She wasn't crying, not really, but something inside her cracked, not from the firing, but from the silence that followed it. No one had said anything. Not Emily, not Mateo. Not even the regulars she served every morning. The bus roared past without stopping. She didn't wave. She just stood there, staring at the puddles. Back inside, Roy strutted behind the counter like he'd won. Like the air didn't feel heavier now. But not everyone shared his mood. Customers whispered. Some looked toward the table where the veteran sat, still chewing slowly like every bite cost him a memory. One woman pulled out her phone and propped it against her coffee cup. She hit record. Roy didn't notice. He barked at Mateo again. We need scrambled and hash for table 5. Mateo didn't rush. He didn't even look up. Yeah, he said, voice dry. I heard you. The air shifted. The bell above the door jingled once, then twice, then again. 4 sharp footsteps. Heavy. Purposeful. 4 figures stepped into the café. Broad shoulders. boots soaked from the rain, uniforms that didn't need to say a word. They weren't armed. They didn't need to be. The room fell silent. Even the grill stopped sizzling like the kitchen itself was holding its breath. One of the men scanned the room. His eyes landed on the booth by the window, on the old man, on the untouched metal. He walked forward, slow and sure, and stood beside the table. "Sir," the first Marine said quietly, "we got your message." The veteran turned slowly, his eyes clearer now, his posture straighter. "I didn't mean to cause trouble," he said, "but she got fired. For feeding me." The Marine nodded. "Yes, sir. We heard." "We came," another one added, "to make sure that kind of thing doesn't go unanswered." Roy finally noticed. He stepped forward, that fake manager's smile plastered on his face. "Gentlemen, what can I do for you?" The second Marine didn't blink. "Are you the one in charge here?" "I am," Roy said, "and I'd appreciate it if you didn't interfere with my staff." "Your staff?" a third Marine asked, stepping in. "From what we saw, your staff included a woman who gave up her own money to feed a veteran. That's not interference. That's character." Roy's face twitched. "This is a business. We have rules. She broke them." The first Marine took one calm step forward. "You fired a woman for showing compassion to a man who risked everything for this country. A man we all know, a man we all respect." "You humiliated her," he said, voice still low, "not just in front of your staff, but in front of strangers. And now," the third Marine added, "you want to hide behind policy?" Roy's tone thinned. "It's not personal." "Sure, looked personal," came the reply. From the front booth, a man cleared his throat. He wore a hoodie, earbuds hanging loose around his neck. "She's the reason I come here," he said, "not the food." Then another voice, a woman near the bar. "She remembers my name. She remembers how I like my coffee." And finally, from the drink station, a soft voice cracked. It was Emily. "She walks me to my car when it's dark," she said. "She's the reason I stayed after my first week." Roy's hand hovered above the counter, searching for control. But it was gone. And outside, Ava still stood at the bus stop, clutching her apron, not knowing that inside everything had already begun to change. Inside the diner, the tension sat thick in the air. Roy crossed his arms behind the counter, jaw tight, but his eyes flicked from one face to another. He knew control was slipping. He could feel it. But still, he tried. "All right, folks," he said, raising his voice with a forced chuckle. "Show's over. Let's get back to our meals. We're not turning this place into a circus." But no one moved. The cafe was quiet. Too quiet. Customers looked at each other, then at the Marines, then back at Roy. A woman by the window, gray hair tucked under a knitted cap, stood up slowly. She walked with a cane, steadily, but with purpose. "My name's Jean," she said. "I was a nurse during the Gulf War. My brother came home, in a coffin." She paused, letting that hang in the air. "That man over there, he could have been him. And that waitress, she did more in 10 minutes than you have in your whole time running this place." Roy's mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. Then another voice. It was Reggie. A quiet man who always sat in the corner booth with his crossword and black coffee. No one really paid him much mind. "I've been coming here since it opened," he said. "Never had a problem with anyone, except you." He nodded toward Roy. "You don't lead people by fear. You lead by example. And Tasha," he used her name, "she was the example." Soft clapping started. 1 or 2 people, then a few more. It wasn't loud. It wasn't a scene. It was real. Roy looked around, eyes darting. "This is my place," he said. "I decide what goes and what doesn't." One of the Marines stepped forward again. The captain. His tone softer this time. "No one's questioning your right to run a business, sir. We're questioning how you did it. You could have pulled her aside, asked a question, had a conversation. But instead," he said, "you humiliated her. Publicly." Roy's voice cracked. "She gave away food. That costs money." "How much?" Jean asked. $10? 12? No answer. She pointed to the woman who had been filming from her table. "How much you think this will cost you once that hits Facebook?" Roy followed her finger and finally noticed the phone. Propped up, recording, steady. His face went pale. Mateo stepped out from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel. "You've been riding us like we're lucky to work here," he said. "But Tasha, she stayed late, came in early, never complained. She bought Emily lunch her first week, didn't say a word about it." Emily stepped forward again. Her voice wavered. "She helped me fix my brakes, paid half. I didn't even ask." The room was still, but the weight of every voice was heavy now. Solid. Roy stood in the same space, but it no longer belonged to him. He sneered. "You all think she's a saint now. A hero?" Nobody answered. And that silence was louder than anything. The old veteran, still at the booth, slowly folded his napkin. He reached for the Purple Heart, then paused. One of the Marines stopped him gently. "Leave it," he said. "It belongs here now." The old man nodded, understanding, then turned to the door. "Tell her thank you," he whispered. "Tell her, my boys never forget." And with that, he walked out. Not fast, not with strength, but with dignity. The bell above the door jingled as he left, and the weight he left behind stayed in the room. Roy stood stiff behind the counter, but then a car rolled up outside. Quiet. No lights, no horns, just a black SUV, the kind that didn't waste time. Ava, still sitting at the bench near the bus stop, looked up. She didn't recognize the vehicle, but something about it felt different. The doors opened. 4 more men stepped out. Not kids, not tourists, veterans. You could tell by the way they moved, calm, measured, the kind of calm that doesn't need to speak to be heard. One of them wore sergeant stripes, his name stitched into his chest, Cole. They entered the café. The room stilled again, like a power shift had just walked through the door. Reggie whispered under his breath, "Those ain't customers." Roy stiffened. Sergeant Cole walked toward the booth. The plate still sat there. Half-eaten meal, Purple Heart glinting faintly. He looked around the room. "Who fired the woman who gave this man his plate?" he asked. No one answered. He turned to Roy. "You?" Roy swallowed. "Look, I don't know what this is about." "Yes, you do," Cole said, calm but firm. The tallest Marine, scar across his chin, stepped in. "That man, the veteran, he served with our founder's uncle, the man who taught us what it means to stand for something." Cole added, "He told us he'd been helped by someone who showed more loyalty than he's seen in years, and then got fired for it." "Yeah," the scarred Marine said. "So we made time." Roy tried to laugh it off. "This is blown out of proportion. She broke a policy." Another Marine pointed to the Purple Heart. "You see that? That's not decoration, that's sacrifice. You don't even see the difference." And the café watched. Ava didn't know yet, but her quiet act of kindness had just sparked a storm, one that no amount of rules could silence. Outside, Ava still stood by the sidewalk, unsure if she should leave or go back inside. She could see through the window now. The booth was empty. The old man was gone. But the Marines were still there, and so was Roy. Something inside her chest pulled tight. She didn't want to cause more trouble. That's when the front door flung open, and Emily came rushing out. Her apron was wrinkled and her cheeks were red from crying. "Tasha," she called, "you need to come back inside, please." Ava hesitated. "Emily, I'm not trying to make this worse." "You didn't make it worse," Emily said, grabbing her wrist gently. "You're the only one who made it make sense." Inside, the air felt heavier than ever. Roy stood behind the counter, arms crossed, but his usual confidence gone. His voice had lost that smug tone. His eyes flicked toward the Marines, toward the customers, toward his staff, and none of them looked back with loyalty. When Ava walked in, the bell rang just like it always did, but this time people clapped. Not loud, not dramatic, just real. A slow, steady rhythm of hands that said, "We saw you, and we're still watching." Roy spoke first. His voice cracked at the edges. "I thought I made it clear. You don't work here anymore." Ava stood firm, her apron still folded in her hands. "I'm not here for the job," she said. "I'm here because a man who served this country deserved a hot meal, and because I'm tired of pretending kindness needs permission." Sergeant Cole stepped toward her, offering a small, respectful nod. "Miss Daniels, we're sorry you were treated this way. It should have never happened." Ava nodded softly. "Thank you." The tall Marine with the scar looked around the room. His voice wasn't loud, but it reached every ear. "You all watched this happen," he said. "Some of you filmed it. Some just stayed quiet. But someone needs to say this out loud. You don't punish people for being decent." Roy scoffed. "Oh, come on. She didn't cure cancer. She handed out a plate of meatloaf." Cole looked at him calmly. "She handed out dignity. That counts." At the front, Cheryl Miles stood up. She ran a hair salon 2 doors down, wore heels even on rainy days. But her voice was solid. "I've seen how you treat your staff, Roy. The little notes, the threats. You didn't fire her for giving away food. You fired her because she reminded people that you don't care." Roy shook his head. "That's not true." Reggie, still in the corner booth, leaned back in his seat. "Man, I've sat here every morning for 2 years. You've never once said good morning, never asked how I was doing. Tasha did. She made this place feel like it mattered." Roy stepped out from behind the counter, voice rising. "You all want to make me the villain here? Go ahead. But none of you pay the bills. None of you know what it takes to keep the lights on." Mateo leaned out from the kitchen window, wiping his hands slowly with a towel. "We do," he said. "We clean your floors. We take your yelling. And the one person who actually made this place feel human, you threw her out." "This is mutiny," Roy snapped. Cole shook his head. "Number this is accountability." The bell rang again. A man in his early 50s walked in, trim haircut, navy jacket. He looked around the cafe like he'd already heard everything. "My name's Charles Fenner," he said. "I run the Veteran Outreach Center just outside town. I heard what happened. Didn't take long for the story to hit our group chat." He turned to Ava. "If you're not already hired, I'd be proud to offer you a position at our center. Better hours, better pay, and a place where people actually value compassion." Ava blinked. She hadn't expected that. "Not here. Not this fast." "Why?" she asked quietly. Charles smiled. "Because Walter Haggerty, your customer, is my uncle, and he said you treated him with more care than most people have in years." Behind him, Cheryl crossed her arms and nodded. "Looks like you just lost your best employee, Roy, and half your regulars, too." The Purple Heart still sat on the table, untouched. glinting softly like it was waiting for someone to do the right thing. And this time, someone had. The café wasn't just a diner anymore. It had become a mirror, a place where everyone had to look at themselves and ask, "Did I do enough?" Roy? He stood stiff, jaw clenched, watching his world unravel. But Ava? She stood in the middle of it all, hands still holding that apron. And she didn't say a word. She didn't have to. Ava stood there, hands still gripping the apron she no longer wore. The Purple Heart still rested quietly on the napkin at the booth, like it belonged there, like it had claimed that space in honor of something bigger than rules or routine. Roy glanced around, searching for someone to back him up. But even the dishwasher, a quiet teen named Omar who usually kept his head down, had stepped out from the back. Omar leaned against the wall, arms folded. He cleared his throat. "I was in the kitchen when she gave him that meal," he said. "She didn't steal it. She pulled $10 from her own tips and told Mateo to ring it in." Roy opened his mouth, but Omar didn't give him the chance. "And you know what else?" he added. "She's the only one here who ever asked if I needed a ride home. I live 2 buses and a walk away. No one else even knows that." The silence in the room wasn't awkward. It was weighty. No one looked away. "She got fired for something my mom would have done," Omar said softly. "So, if she's not good enough to work here, I'm probably not either." Roy narrowed his eyes. "You quitting?" Omar gave a one-shoulder shrug. "I don't know yet. But I know I'm not scared of you anymore." Then, near the window, a man with a trucker's jacket and a salt and pepper beard stood up. He hadn't said a word all morning. He pulled a $20 bill from his wallet, walked over, and dropped it on the counter. "For the veterans' lunch," he said, "and for the waitress who should still be here." And then he left. That started something. One by one, customers rose from their seats. Some dropped cash on tables. Others just nodded to Ava as they passed her, like she was someone they'd always known, even if they hadn't. By the time the 6th person walked out, Roy's voice was nearly a growl. "This is ridiculous." "No," Emily said softly, standing beside Ava now. "This is what happens when people stop being afraid of you." Mateo came out from the kitchen next. He didn't have a towel this time, just his apron, folded neatly in his hands. "I'm done," he said simply, placing it on the counter. "I've worked in a lot of kitchens, Roy, but I've never had to look someone in the eye while they got fired for being human." Roy's voice cracked again. "You people think I'm the enemy? I built this place. I put in the hours. And you forgot who helped you keep it running," Cheryl said from near the door. She hadn't left either. Ava still hadn't moved much. She didn't speak over anyone, didn't raise her voice. She just stood there, like the eye of a storm that hadn't asked to form. Sergeant Cole turned to her. "We don't show up for just anyone," he said. "This wasn't about charity. It was about respect." Ava nodded slowly. "I didn't do it for a reaction," she said. "He just looked hungry." "That's what made it matter," said the Marine with the scar. "You gave him more than food." Omar stepped forward again, fumbling a little. I'm not great with words, but thanks. I was having a rough day, and you reminded me people still care." Ava gave him a small smile. "Thanks, Omar." Then Emily stepped closer, eyes still glassy. "I should have said something when he fired you. I'm sorry." "You didn't owe me that," Ava said gently. "But thank you for saying it now." Outside, more people had started to gather. Curious neighbors, a couple of news reporters, some with phones, some with questions. But inside, the café was already changed. A few hours later, Ava sat on the edge of her couch in her tiny apartment, still wearing the same hoodie, still processing it all. She didn't even know the video existed until Emily sent her the link. She watched herself walk out of the cafe, then walk back in, then speak. "I'm here because I'm tired of acting like kindness needs permission." She didn't even recognize her voice at first. It sounded stronger, like someone she wanted to be. That same night, her inbox started filling up. Messages, invitations, interviews, but one email stood out. Subject, Job Opportunity. Stand with us from Jordan Malik, Haggerty Veterans Outreach Center. It read, "Miss Daniels, Walter is a dear friend of our founder and one of the reasons this center exists. He told us what you did. Then we saw it for ourselves. We're expanding. We're looking for someone with warmth, grace, and judgment. Let us show you the kind of place that values that." Ava read it 3 times, then called the number. Jordan picked up. "Miss Daniels, we've been talking about you all day." Ava smiled. "I didn't even know his name." "Walter." "He remembers everything," Jordan said. "Not always in order. But he said one thing clearly. She saw me. That's more than most do." The next morning, she took the same bus, same stop. But everything felt different. Inside the Haggerty Center, the walls weren't shiny. The furniture wasn't new, but it felt real. On the lobby wall, someone had already printed a still image from the video. Ava standing in the cafe, the Marines behind her. Underneath it, handwritten in black marker, "You don't punish people for being decent." Walter sat in a chair nearby, sipping coffee. "You made it," he said, smiling. "Yeah," Ava whispered. "I made it." And though the diner she left behind would deal with its own downfall, Ava had already found something better. Not fame, not money, just the feeling that, finally, kindness had a place to live. And this time, no one could take it away.